Have you ever spent hours trying to memorize vocabulary lists just to forget everything the next day?
You know nothing, Jon Snow.
For most people, trying to memorize lists of words don't work. And in this video, I'm going to explain to you why this is not the most effective method for most of us and what to do instead. Hi everyone, I'm Fanny. I'm a French and English teacher online, and I have studied languages, linguistics and the science of language. And on this channel, we talk about everything French learning and language learning in general. And as I said, in this video, I'm going to share with you other ways to memorize words that don't consist in trying to learn a list of words. If that works for you, that's great. Personally, it doesn't work for me. It could, but it would require a lot more effort and it's not really fun. So what is the reason why vocabulary lists don't work? If you are familiar with language learning, then you know what rote memorization is. It's just memorizing without understanding what you're trying to memorize. We've all done that as a student. We try to learn a lesson by heart without really understanding what it was about. That's me with my history lessons, for example. And let's be honest, I have forgotten everything today from what I've learned when I was in high school. And when it comes to learning a language, you don't want to forget it the next day. The thing with rote memorization is it doesn't create strong neural connections. It only activates shallow memory encoding, which means things are going to stay in your memory, but for a very short amount of time. Trying to memorize isolated words, for example, apple is pomme, activates semantic memory, but without context or emotional connection, the brain does not prioritize storage or retrieval, which means it's not going to stay in your memory and you're not going to be able to use it. A study from 1975 found that the deeper you process information by associating a word to an emotion or a story, for example, the better you remember it. Think of your brain as a nightclub. Only words with VIP passes, emotions, context, usage get in. The problem is lists of words overload the short-term memory. Your short-term memory can only hold more or less 7 words at once. So when you try to cram 30 unrelated words at once, they won't stick, or at least most of them won't stick. If you pair one of those words with emotion, usage, just a picture, a story, then this one is more likely to stick. As I said before, when you try to memorize words in isolation, your brain doesn't build retrieval pathways, which means you might be able to remember the words, but your brain is not going to be able to use it when you want to talk, and it's going to be stored in your passive vocabulary, which means you can understand the word if somebody uses it, but yourself, you won't be able to actively use it. Lists don't build associative networks in your brain, and to become fluent, you need to build different pathways using your different senses and emotion situations. Think about it. If you want to memorize the word pain, is it easier just to think of the word pain or je vais acheter du pain chaud à la boulangerie? Instantly, I smell the bread, I see the bakery, all my senses are activated, my emotions also, because I like the bread, and maybe I remember a trip to France, all of that will make the memorization process easier. So now we know that learning lists is not effective for most of us, and we know why. Now what to do instead of doing that. This part is also based on cognitive science, so the science that study the brain and our memorization processes and our neural pathway, neural connections, all of that. The first recommendation is not mine. Any of those recommendations are not mine, even though I obviously used them and I can say this is what works. There is a study from 1985 that says that language is acquired, not learned, through meaningful input. That theory I've already mentioned in other videos is the comprehensible input. That means that in order to absorb new words and really memorize them and be able to use them, you need to expose yourself to input that is slightly above your level of speaking, so what you are able to say already. So for example, if you can understand between 60 to 80%, so around 70%, and the rest of the words that you don't know, you're going to be able to understand with the context, and then you're going to be able to memorize them a lot more. Another tip, and I've talked about it before in other videos also, is don't learn just words, isolated words, without an article, without an adjective, even without a verb. If you're learning a noun, pair it with the article. First of all, it's going to give you the gender, if it's a Roman language or a language with genders. And also maybe pair it with an adjective. If you're still learning the word bread, pain, maybe you can learn du pain chaud. Everybody likes warm bread, I don't know, unless you're celiac, sorry about that. If you're learning, I don't know, just the verb take, prendre in French. You can take a lot of different things. Tu peux prendre une douche, prendre un bain, prendre son petit déjeuner, prendre l'avion. The brain stores chunks of words as single units, which makes speech faster and more natural. When you try to speak, you try to use those, it flows more easily. If you still have your list, at least it's a list of chunks, like word in chunks, then one tip that I would share with you is try to retrieve without looking. So use those flashcard tools like Anki or Quizlet, which means you're not just reading through the list, you try to use your memory completely in order to retrieve the words. A lot of those flashcards lists, I know Duolingo also uses that, is spaced repetition. Spaced repetition, as the name indicates, is spacing out the moments you're gonna review a certain word. It mimics how our memory consolidates. Another tip would be to identify the way you memorize. Most of us are more visual, but we also can use our movement memory. So you can try to move while you memorize. You can try to listen, so use your auditory memory, so just listening to the words over and over, or using the words in sentences that you repeat out loud, or try to listen to those sentences over and over again. You might want to try this one, so connect words to movement sounds to create stronger memory traces. For example, I'm going to talk about one example that I have lived recently. So I'm learning German, and I was having a conversation at the table with a person, and that person said in the context that word that I didn't know, that is tauschen, which means to exchange. And she had this object in her hand, and she made the movement at the same time, so I understood what tauschen means. And I imagine a bag. I know the word Tasche, for German people this is going to mean nothing, but for me Tasche, tauschen is similar. So I just now imagine somebody exchanging bags, Tasche means bag, with me. So I have this picture in my head of me exchanging handbags with somebody, and I remember the verb tauschen from the word that I already know, Tasche, from that person that I know personally now. And I used my emotions to create stronger connections in my brain, and I've memorized this word. I have never had to read it again, ever. I just heard it once, created that emotional connection in my brain, and now I've remembered it. And the last tip that I have for you is to simply use the words. So once a week, maybe try to write a little text with the words that you try to memorize this week, or just speak to people, speak to yourself, record yourself speaking. This will help transfer the passive vocabulary, so the words that you now can understand, to your active vocabulary, the words that you can actively use. And while you do that, if you want to write using the words that you try to memorize, maybe write a fun memory or something you can attach to emotions or sound or your senses. And I can guarantee you this is gonna be a lot easier to memorize those words, and you're gonna be able to reuse them. I guess I will finish this video here. So forget those endless vocabulary lists. If you want to be able to speak more naturally and have a lot of vocabulary, you want to pair the words you learn with emotions, learn them in context, pair them with your senses, use everything you can, your eyes, your ears, your body to memorize the words. Use them often, learn them in chunks, and space out the repetitions. I'm not saying that, science says that. So let me know what you're going to try in the future in order to memorize vocabulary. Let me know if lists work for you, because maybe they do, and to be fair, probably did for me at some point when I was younger and I had a very strong brain that was doing a lot of neural connections, but as I'm aging, it's not the case anymore. I mean, still doing neural connections and building neural pathways, but less and less. And once again, if lists work for you perfectly and this is how you learn a language, first of all, I don't know why you clicked this video and that's just great. That's, I mean, good for you. What can I say? If you're able to years later retrieve those words that you learned on a list, amazing. This video is more for those of us who struggle with lists and want to really learn the language and acquire the language for good. As a little exercise, I'm going to ask you to write in the comments what is a new phrase you learned today and can you use it in a sentence in the language that you're learning. If it's French, then write in French. I'll be able to understand what you're saying. But if it's another language, then just share in the comments. And thank you so much for watching. Don't forget to like this video, that really boosts my channel, and subscribe if you're new. Welcome. If you're not subscribed, then you should subscribe because I make a lot of those videos about language learning, and I will see you very soon for another video. Bye.